The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical Psychology for Today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, voiced by David Alt. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from Wisdom of the Idiots by Idries Shah. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. Milk and Buttermilk. Murid Laki Hamayun put this question to the Maulana Bahuddin. In the town of Gulafshan there is a circle of followers. Some of them are in the condition of exercises, but the majority are those who collect weekly to learn from the daily transactions and teachings of the murshid, or guide. Many of the murids, or disciples, understand the meaning of the tales and the events, and use these to correct their outward and inward behavior. Many of the outside followers, however, do not appear to benefit from the events and the transactions, seeking instead books and teachings which will give them precise promises of progress. How is it that disciples are in pain when ordinary followers fail to understand the meaning of the stories and events, especially since many of the latter are their close friends and each desires that there should be a unification between disciples and followers, even of the outward sort? Bahuddin replied, "Discipleship was instituted in order to concentrate those who can learn without raw objectives. Disciples who grieve because their fellows are not learning in the same manner and at the same rate are grieving because they have imagined that affection must produce capacity. Capacity, however, is earned. Affection is given and taken. Accidental collections of people centering around a teaching will always endure a separating out, like the separating of butter from milk in the presence of the agitating factor, which is manifest or concealed but nonetheless present whenever a renewal of teaching starts to work. This is the shaking of the vessel containing the milk. People imagine that, like buttermilk, when there is a movement, or jumbish, they will all be affected in the same way. But both butter and skimmed milk have their functions, although these may be in different fields. Talisman. It is reported that a fakir who wanted to learn without effort was after a time turned away from the circle of Sheikh Shah Gwath Shatar. When Shatar was dismissing him, the fakir said, "You have the reputation of being able to teach all wisdom in the twinkling of an eye, yet you expect me to spend much time with you." "You have not yet learned to learn how to learn, but you will find out what I mean," said the Sufi. The fakir pretended to go away, but he used to steal into the tekia every night in order to see what the sheikh did. Not long afterwards he saw Shah Gwath take a jewel out of a certain engraved metal casket. This gem he held over the heads of his disciples, saying, "This is the repository of my knowledge, and it is none other than the talisman of illumination." "So this is the secret of the sheikh's power," thought the fakir. In the advanced hours of that very night, he entered the meditation hall again and stole the talisman. But in his hands the jewel, no matter how he tried, would yield no power and no secrets. He was bitterly disappointed. He set himself up as a teacher, enrolled disciples, and tried again and again to illuminate them or himself by means of the talisman, but all to no avail. One day he was sitting in his shrine after his disciples had gone to bed, meditating upon his problems, when Shatar appeared before him. "O fakir," said Shah Gwath, "you can always steal something, but you cannot always make it work. You can even steal knowledge, but it can be useless to you like the thief who stole the barber's razor, made through the knowledge of the swordsmith but lacking the knowledge of shaving. He set himself up as a barber and died in misery when he could not even shave a single beard, but instead cut several throats. "But I have the talisman and you have not," said the fakir. "Yes, you have the talisman, but I am Shatar," said the Sufi. "I can, with my skill, make another talisman. You, with the talisman, cannot become Shatar." "Why then have you come? Merely to torture me?" cried the fakir. "I came to tell you that if you had not been so literal-minded as to imagine that to have a thing is the same as being capable of being transformed by it, you would have been ready to learn how to learn." But the fakir thought that the Sufi was only trying to get his talisman back, and because he was not ready to learn how to learn, he decided to persist in experiments with the jewel. His disciples continued to do so, and their followers and theirs. In fact, the rituals which are the result of his restless experimenting nowadays form the essence of their religion. Nobody could imagine, so sanctified by time have these observances become, that they had their origin in the circumstances which have just been related. The hoary practitioners of the faith, too, are held to be so venerable and infallible that these beliefs will never die. Dispute with academics. It is recorded that Bahuddin Naqshband was asked, "Why do you not dispute with scholastics? Such and such a sage regularly does so. This causes the scholar's total confusion and his own disciples' invariable admiration." He said, "Go and ask those who remember the time when I myself used to contend with academics. I regularly refuted their surmises and their imagined proofs with relative ease. Those who were then present on numerous occasions will tell you that. But one day a wiser man than I said, 'You so frequently and predictably shame the men of the tongue that there is a monotony in it. This is especially so because it is to no final purpose, since the academicians are without understanding and continue to wrangle long after their positions have been demolished.' He added, 'Your students are in a constant state of wonderment at your victories. They have learnt to admire you. Instead, they should have perceived the comparative worthlessness and lack of significance of your opponents. You have thus, in victory, failed by, let us say, a quarter. Their wonderment, too, takes up much of their time when they could be appreciating something worthwhile. So you have failed by perhaps another quarter. 2 quarters are equal to 1/2. You have 1/2 of an opportunity left." That was 20 years ago. That is why I do not trouble myself or others with scholars, whether for victory or defeat. Now and again one may strike the self-appointed scholars a blow to demonstrate their hollowness to students, as one hits an empty pot. To do any more is both wasteful and tantamount to giving intellectuals an importance through granting them gratuitous attention that they certainly could not attain by themselves. Story of Hiravi. At the time of King Mahmud, the conqueror of Ghazna, there lived a young man by the name of Haidar Ali Jan. His father, Iskandar Khan, decided to obtain from him the patronage of the emperor, and he sent him to study spiritual matters under the greatest sages of the time. Haidar Ali, when he had mastered the repetitions and the exercises, when he knew the recitals and the bodily postures of the Sufi schools, was taken by his father into the presence of the emperor. "Mighty Mahmud," said Iskandar, "I have had this youth, my eldest and most intelligent son, specially trained in the ways of the Sufis, so that he might obtain a worthy position at your Majesty's court, knowing that you are a patron of the learning of our epoch." Mahmud did not look up, but he merely said, "Bring him back in a year." Slightly disappointed, but nursing high hopes, Iskandar sent Ali to study the works of the great Sufis of the past and to visit the shrines of the ancient masters in Baghdad, so that the intervening time would not be wasted. When he brought the youth back to the court, he said, "Peacock of the age, my son has carried out long and difficult journeys, and at the same time, to his knowledge of exercises, he has added a complete familiarity with the classics of the people of the path. Pray have him examined, so that it may be shown that he could be an adornment of your Majesty's court." "Let him," said Mahmud immediately, "return after another year." During the next 12 months, Haidar Ali crossed the Oxus and visited Bokhara and Samarkand, Khazar-e-Arifin and Tashkand, Dushanbe and the turbats of the Sufi saints of Turkestan. When he returned to the court, Mahmud of Ghazna took one look at him and said, "He may care to come back after a further year." Haidar Ali made the pilgrimage to Mecca in that year. He travelled to India, and in Persia he consulted rare books and never missed an opportunity of seeking out and paying his respects to the greatest dervishes of the time. When he returned to Ghazna, Mahmud said to him, "Now select a teacher, if he will have you, and come back in a year." When that year was over and Iskandar Khan prepared to take his son to the court, Haidar Ali showed no interest at all in going there. He simply sat at the feet of his teacher in Herat, and nothing that his father could say would move him. "I have wasted my time and my money, and this young man has failed the tests imposed by Mahmud the king," he lamented, and he abandoned the whole affair. Meanwhile, the day when the youth was due to present himself came and went, and then Mahmud said to his courtiers, "Prepare yourselves for a visit to Herat. There is someone there whom I have to see." As the emperor's cavalcade was entering Herat to the flourish of trumpets, Haidar Ali's teacher took him by the hand. He led him to the gate of the Tekia, and there they waited. Shortly afterwards, Mahmud and his courtier Ayaz, taking off their shoes, presented themselves at the sanctuary. "Here, Mahmud," said the Sufi sheikh, "is the man who was nothing while he was a visitor of kings, but who is now one who is visited by kings. Take him as your Sufi counselor, for he is ready." This is the story of the studies of Hiravi, Haidar Ali Jan, the sage of Herat. This podcast is copyright 2016, the Idries Shah Foundation.